Hi guys, today I will read from a book by Howard Zinn. Its name is A People's History of the United States. And why am I doing it? Well, I think USA has an inordinately high degree of influence on the rest of the world, and we all seem to have an opinion about whatever happens in USA because it affects one way or another everybody else. I personally lived in the US for many years, so I have another take on it. But what we read about the history of USA probably is a edited version. It's a sanitized version, and it amounts to propaganda. The real history of the United States, or how the colonization of North America, in fact, the entire Americas, North and South America, started is has been filtered so that the nasty part of it, the extermination of the Indian people, the indigenous people of North and South America, has been cleaned up a lot. But there is at least one book, there are probably more, that is a must read for people to understand the real history of these discovered continent, so to speak. Discovered, it was not discovered by the white man, it was discovered tens of thousands of years ago by other people. But this book is called, named, A People's History of the United States, written by Howard Zinn. And I find it so important that I decided to read a few pages of the first chapter. It's a very long book, more than 700 pages. It has it goes from 1492, and it goes all the way till the turn of the millennia. And it starts with Columbus and the Indians, so-called Red Indians, or American Indians, and it ends with the 2000 election and the war on terrorism. It covers, in chapter 24, the Clinton presidency, and chapter 25 is the 2000 election and the war on terrorism. He doesn't cover, the book does not cover Obama's election, although he did live for 2 years of the Obama administration. He was, I think, over 86 years old by the time the 2008 election took place, so he didn't cover it in the last 2 years of his life. So anyway, I find it extremely important for anyone to understand the DNA of United States to start with, and also by extension to Canada and to all of the South American countries to a lesser and lesser degree. To understand the DNA of this new colonization, it's necessary for one to read this book. I mean, people owe it to themselves to actually read this book. This is what I think. Anyway, so going to chapter 1, it starts with Columbus, the Indians, and human progress. That's the title of the chapter 1. Arawak men and women, naked, tawny, and full of wonder, emerged from their villages onto the island's beaches and swam out to get a closer look at the strange big boat. When Columbus and his sailors came ashore carrying swords, speaking oddly, and Arawaks ran to greet them, brought them food, water, and gifts. He later wrote of this in his log. They brought us parrots and balls of cotton and spears and many other things which they exchanged for the glass beads and hawks' bells. They willingly traded everything they owned. They were well built, with good bodies and handsome features. They do not bear arms and do not know them. For I showed them a sword, and they took it by the edge and cut themselves out of ignorance. They have no iron. Their spears are made of cane. They would make fine servants. With 50 men, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want. These Arawaks of the Bahama Islands were much like Indians on the mainland, who were remarkable, in bracket, European observers were to say this again and again, bracket closed, for their hospitality, their belief in sharing. These traits did not stand out in the Europe of the Renaissance. dominated as it was by the religion of popes, the government of kings, the frenzy for money that marked Western civilization, and its first messenger to the Americas, Christopher Columbus. Columbus wrote, "As soon as I arrived in the Indies, on the first island which I found, I took some of the natives by force in order that they might learn and might give me information of whatever there is in those parts." The information that Columbus wanted most was, where is the gold? He had persuaded the king and queen of Spain to finance an expedition to the lands, the wealth he expected would be on the other side of the Atlantic, the Indies and Asia, gold and spices. For, like other informed people of his time, he knew the world was round and he could sail west in order to get to the Far East. Spain was recently unified, one of the new modern nation-states like France, England, and Portugal. Its population, mostly poor peasants, worked for the nobility, who were 2% of the population and owned 95% of the land. Spain had tied itself to the Catholic Church, expelled all the Jews, driven out the Moors. Like other states of modern world, Spain sought gold, which was becoming the new mark of wealth, more useful than land because it could buy anything. There was gold in Asia, it was thought, and certainly silks and spices, for Marco Polo and others had brought back marvelous things from their overland expeditions centuries before. Now that the Turks had conquered Constantinople and the eastern Mediterranean and controlled the land routes to Asia, a sea route was needed. Portuguese sailors were working their way around the southern tip of Africa. Spain decided to gamble on a long sail across an unknown ocean. In return from bringing back gold and spices, they promised Columbus 10% of the profits, governorship of Newfound Lands, and the fame that would go with a new title, Admiral of the Ocean Sea. He was a merchant's clerk from Italian city of Genoa, part-time weaver, in bracket the son of a skilled weaver, bracket closed, an expert sailor. He set out with 3 sailing ships, the largest of which was Santa Maria, perhaps 100 feet long, and 39 crew members. Columbus would never have made it to Asia, which was thousands of miles further away than he had calculated, imagining a smaller world. He would have been doomed by the great expanse of sea, but he was lucky. 1/4 of the way to there, he came upon an unknown, uncharted land that lay between Europe and Asia, the Americas. It was early October 1492, and 33 days since he and his crew had left the Canary Islands, off the Atlantic coast of Africa. Now they saw branches and sticks floating in the water. They saw flocks of birds. Then there were signs of land. Then, on October 12th, a sailor called Rodrigo saw the early morning moon shining on white sands and cried out. It was an island in the Bahamas, the Caribbean Sea. The first man to sight land was supposed to get a yearly pension of 10,000 maravedis for life, but Rodrigo never got it. Columbus claimed he had seen the light on the evening before. He got the reward. So, approaching land, they were met by Arawak Indians who swam out to greet them. The Arawaks lived in village communes and had developed agriculture of corn, yams, and cassava. They would spin and weave, but they had no horses or work animals. They had no iron, but they wore tiny gold ornaments in their ears. This was to have enormous consequences. It led Columbus to take some of them aboard ship as prisoners because he insisted that they guide him to the source of the gold. He then sailed to what is now Cuba, then to Hispaniola, the island which today consists of Haiti and Dominican Republic, bracket closed. There, bits of visible gold in the rivers and a gold mask presented to Columbus by a local Indian chief led to wild visions of gold fields. On Hispaniola, out of timbers from the Santa Maria, which had run aground, Columbus built a fort, the first European military base in Western Hemisphere. He called it Navidad, in bracket Christmas, and left 39 crew members there with instructions to find and store the gold. He took more Indian prisoners and put them aboard his two remaining ships. At one part of the island, he got into a fight with Indians who refused to trade as many bows and arrows as he and his men wanted. Two were run through with swords and bled to death. Then the Nina and Pinta set sail for the Azores and Spain. When the weather turned cold, the Indian prisoners began to die. Columbus's report to the court in Madrid was extravagant. He insisted he had reached Asia, it was just Cuba actually, and an island off the coast of China, which was Hispaniola. His descriptions were part fact, part fiction. Hispaniola is a miracle, he wrote. Mountains and hills, plains and pastures are both fertile and beautiful. The harbors are unbelievably good, and there are many wide rivers of which the majority contain gold. There are many spices and great mines of gold and other metals. The Indians, Columbus reported, are so naive and so free with their possessions that no one who has not witnessed them would believe it. When you ask for something they have, they never say no. To the contrary, they offer to share with everyone. He concluded his report by asking for a little help from their majesties, and in return he would bring them from his next voyage as much gold as they need and as many slaves as they ask. He was full of religious talk. Thus the eternal God, our Lord, gives victory to those who follow his way over apparent impossibilities, wrote Columbus. Because of Columbus's exaggerated report and promises, his second expedition was given 17 ships and more than 1,200 men. The aim was clear: slaves and gold. They went from island to island in the Caribbean, taking Indians as captives, but as word spread of the Europeans' intent, they found more and more empty villages. On Haiti, they found that the sailors left behind at Fort Navidad had been killed in a battle with the Indians after they had roamed the island in gangs looking for gold, taking women and children as slaves for sex and labor. Now, from his base on Haiti, Columbus sent expedition after expedition into the interior. They found no gold fields, but they had to fill up the ships returning to Spain with some kind of dividend. In the year of 1495, they went on a great slave raid, rounded up 1,500 Arawak men, women, and children, put them in pens guarded by Spaniards and dogs, and then picked 500 best specimens to load onto ships. Of those 500, 200 died en route. The rest arrived in Spain and were put up for sale by the archdeacon of the town, who reported that although the slaves were naked as they were born, as the day they were born, they showed no more embarrassment than animals. Columbus later wrote, "Let us, in the name of the Holy Trinity, go on sending all the slaves that can be sold." This is just the first few pages of the entire book, People's History of the United States. Of course, it comes later on to the slave trade, where people were bringing humans from Africa because they had killed off the indigenous population, and the indigenous population were not willing to be enslaved, and they were good woodsmen. So once they ran away into the interior, it was hard finding them, and there are estimates of how many millions of the First Nation people were actually killed, and some say there was 3 million killed. Some say no, it could be not more than a million at that stage. And still more historians think that there were as many as 8 million First Nation Indians involved in this essential genocide. So I shall stop here. It's already more than 15 minutes. But this is a book that I think is a must read for all those people who made America their home, to better understand the DNA of this nation. Every nation, every people have been cruel to many others, but this one really takes the cake. Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States. Thank you.